Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for tuning in this morning to this official webinar with Andy Street. My name's Ed James, co-founder of HDY Agency and host on Heart. We're really excited about this. It's the first time we've done this in this format, and there's obviously a lot to have a chat about, which we'll get into soon. I guess I'll just explain how this will work. I've got a lot to ask Andy about. A lot of the questions have been pre-sent in as well. So we're going to have a chat about a lot of really interesting things. I'd love to get your questions as well to put to Andy. So if you just hit the Q&A button, put your question in and we will get to that towards the end. So that's how the format will work. But we have Andy for up to an hour, so feel free to ask anything you like. I've got no doubt we're going to get some amazing insights. So Andy, first of all, morning.
Good morning to you, Ed, and lovely to be on. And it's nice to see people just joining. I am conscious, though, Ed, that some probably joined after you said your very first introductory remarks. So,
oh, really? Okay.
I hope everybody heard what you had to say. But great to be on with you. Yeah.
Fantastic. We'll get into this in a minute, but I guess we can't chat today of all days without at least talking about the situation in America. I'm not expecting any insight because I don't think anybody has any insight. But what are your observations as to what has happened overnight in the States?
Well, it's incredible, isn't it? I thought you might.
It's crazy.
So I had a little look at the BBC News just before we came on, and I don't think anyone knows what is going on. And I mean, bizarre is an understatement. The president has declared victory prematurely, but then he's challenged it in the Supreme Court. So challenging your own victory, I don't understand. But I guess one of the underlying points is the pollsters lose again. That's very clear because I think everyone was clear, and it really does talk about a country that has got some deep divisions, hasn't it? The US. That's the most the obvious outcome. Yeah, and when we've seen the pictures of Washington being boarded up before an election and it potentially being conducted in the Supreme Court, you do think whatever the problems we've got in Britain, at least we can conduct an election fairly and the result tends to be known decisively. So maybe we haven't got that much wrong after all.
Good. All right. Well, let's move on then to the UK. We haven't got the same issues as America, but we have got some. And by that, I mean, we're about to go into another 4-week lockdown across the UK and, of course, the West Midlands too, which starts tomorrow. What would you like to say to businesses about these new restrictions?
So I think the obvious thing to say is that nobody expected us to be here. Nobody wanted us to be here. That's sort of blindingly obvious. But it did become necessary. We've all seen the data on the screen, on the TV screens over the weekend, the changed scientific advice. And I think most people I talk to when they see that say, yeah, I understand why this has to happen. And then the simple message is we have all got to comply with the rules to give us the best chance of coming out on the 2nd of December with restrictions that probably won't disappear completely, but at least we can live with. And really, that's what's now at stake. In terms of business, the critical things, of course, are business support. It's great that the furlough scheme is being extended. There will be some discretionary grants as well. I do appreciate, though, how terrible the timing is for some sectors. And I do know that that's going to do incredible damage in those sectors as well. But we'll talk about maybe some of the things that can be done to think about the future as we go through the next hour.
Okay, we will. Let me take you back to 2007. You climbed up the ranks at John Lewis and became the MD of effectively one of Britain's largest brands. You got that job, and then everyone knows what happened a year afterwards. I'd just quite like to understand what you went through and what you learned at that time, because I imagine it was an amazing thing to have that job, but then the world just completely changed and we had that huge crash. What was that like for you in the hot seat at that time?
Yeah, well, it was the kiss of death, really. I took over at the beginning of 2007, and for the previous, certainly since the millennium, all the graphs had been going the right way. You know, John Lewis was in a reasonably robust shape. And everyone thought that was going to continue because the crash of 2008 was a surprise to us, really, wasn't it? But I took over and all the graphs started to go south. And so I thought, oh, have I killed it?
And you think it's not my fault?
Exactly. But and of course, by September, it was September '08, we had the full-blown financial crash of that autumn. And that autumn, I remember clearly, John Lewis's sales were down massively. We were in a very exposed sector. Our profit was halved. And of course, there were lots of big retail failures on the high street. Woolworths, of course, was the one. And we all remember the pictures of boarded up shops, which we'd not had in the previous 10 years, of course. That's perhaps the thing to put in perspective there. So it felt tough, actually. I don't mind admitting. And I felt a personal responsibility. Okay, what am I going to do? And remember, John Lewis is owned by its employees. It exists, quote unquote, for the happiness of its employees, its partners. And so I did feel this sort of responsibility on my shoulders. But I then got my brain around it and decided, right, we are going to take some critical decisions. We are, in a sense, going to use this crisis to replot the future of John Lewis. But it was hard personally. And business leaders on the phone, on the call, whether they be running small or big businesses, I suspect lots of them have got that same sense of personal responsibility this morning.
Could I just ask you for a bit more of an insight into that, though? You said you made some big calls. I mean, what specifically? I mean, what? And I'm kind of thinking that will help a lot of us, myself as well included, in terms of now. So just talk us through the kind of decisions you had to make.
So the first decision, actually, it was not about the business strategy, but it was about a leadership decision. It was about how open we were going to be about the difficulties we were in, actually. We'd always shared all of our numbers with everybody, journalists, employees, and there were people in my ear that Christmas saying, don't do it, Andy, it's a terrible story, close up. And I remember saying to the team, no, we are going to be absolutely transparent. We actually invited the BBC TV cameras in that autumn to tell the story of the next 18 months. And I didn't know if it was going to be a story of failure or of turnaround. But I knew that openness would help us get our team on board for whatever we chose to do, actually. But the big point that we decided, and I remember it was November 2008, so the crash was in full steam. We decided we were going to put our future on online retailing. Now, that seems now 12 years on so blindingly obvious. But at
the time, it wasn't.
That time, in '08, online was worth about 7% of our sales. Right. And we said, right, we're going to I would say we bet on red. And red for us was the future of online. Now, it didn't mean we weren't still expanding our shops. Still, shops were absolutely critical, but the two went hand in glove together. Yeah. And it meant some big decisions like putting our capital into the IT functions, the distribution functions, because they were the things that would give us a brilliant online business. And when I left, that Christmas I left in 2016, nearly 50% of the business was online. So the decision that we took back in '08 to bet on online came good. And it sounds easy, but if you think of the downside of that decision, it meant some of the other things we might have done didn't happen. So there were some losers in that decision as well. And the tough part of it was telling the people who were the losers that perhaps that was the case. And we actually embarked on a redundancy program that saw 7,000 of our own partners face redundancy over the next few years in order to pivot the business to where the future was. So it wasn't easy. It was tough, but we saw it through.
How would you compare what's happening in the economy now to the 2008 financial crash?
Interesting question. So it's far worse now. I mean, far, far worse. I mean, there'll be people on the line who've literally been shut since March. Take a brilliant business here like the NEC, shut. Yeah. So it's far, far worse. There are some sectors, of course, now that have actually thrived. There are some winners in this. We've heard about on digital businesses that have come through extremely well. If you think of Amazon as the obvious example, they've had an absolutely remarkable time. So, but overall, it's far worse because demand's down. But of course, you also have to think about the causes of this, which then talk about maybe the way out of it. So, of course, the cause in '08 was we'd all, frankly, had a party that we couldn't pay for, and then the credit bubble burst, and hence why it was called the credit crunch. So actually, it was this question of where's the supply of cash? The banking sector was completely out of kilter. That's actually not the case now. Cash is available quite cheaply. The banking sector has actually sustained its operations through all of this. So it's very different what's driven this, but the outcome is even worse for many businesses.
As a leader, how brave do you think you have to be?
It's so easy to reflect with the benefit of hindsight, and I'm not convinced. I felt this at the time. I actually was, but the answer to your question is, the braver you can be, the better, because business ultimately is about, I've used the word already, is about placing your bets. It is about saying, this is how we are going to be different. And if you're going to be different, you have probably got to take, by its very nature,
It's a risk, isn't it?
Brave decision, a risk, yeah. And the old adage in business, if you have a greater risk, you get a greater reward. The other risk is that it might go horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And you know, in our story in '08, there were people who said, Andy, you're getting this wrong.
I was about to ask that. Yeah, I imagine there are a lot of them who were basically going, this is not the right way. And I guess that's, you know, for you as the guy in charge, that's a big call to almost go, this is my call, and this is what I will make, knowing that there's a lot of people who don't back you.
Yeah. So, but this does come to the unique structure of John Lewis, which I always argued was an advantage for us.
Right.
So it wasn't just my call. Yeah, I was in charge, but it's not a dictatorship, contrary to public view. You know, first of all, you have your team around you, and we took those decisions collectively, the senior team, and we might explore a bit of that. But then we embarked on a hearts and minds piece. So we spent so much time and effort persuading our partners that this was the right thing to do. Personally, I got on the train around the country, took events in all of our stores, or my board did, because we knew that we had to get people's buy-in to the changes that were happening. So things they expected to happen, maybe investment in their shop that didn't happen because we were putting into our automated warehouses in the centre. We needed people to understand why that was. And so, yeah, you have to get out there and sell your vision and get people behind it. And largely, we did that pretty well.
And I guess that comes back to that being open about things as well, because the more open you are, you know, everyone can see what the big goal is then.
Absolutely. So when we thought about how we were going to communicate this, we thought about 3 principles that needed to go into this. And I think they apply again now, actually. And I almost want to send this book to Boris Johnson because I think it's so relevant. First of all, you have to acknowledge the situation that everybody's in. You have to be honest. Just leveling with people that something's going to be tough is really important.
It really is.
Second thing you have to do, though, is you have to give people the idea that you've got actions immediately that can make a small difference. And when our profit was halving, we pulled out fairly insignificant things that just let people think the team at the top have got a plan. They know what they're doing. There's going to be change. But then you've also got to paint the picture of the future, the sort of vision piece. But if you just do vision and you don't have it matched with actions that are being delivered now, people don't sort of sense they're on that journey to the vision in the future. So we talked about all those sort of principles of our comms and our plan to try to get people on board with us.
Amazing. No, it's important stuff, isn't it? Because you can go, everything will be all right, but actually people know right now it's not, and the future is not a good place. Ultimately, I think it will be, but there's a lot of stuff we've got to get through to get to that place. And I think the more honest you can be, that's an absolute strength, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. We've talked a little bit about this as well, the push to online. How do you see this huge, I mean, because it's been a huge growth and it's just going to get even more so. How do you see this affecting things in the future? I'm thinking especially with regard to retail here. So what does the future look like with that backdrop?
Oh, I'm very clear on this, Ed. The online revolution doesn't just apply to retail, it applies across the whole economy. So retail's been transformed. Obviously, we can see both the opportunities, the new companies there. And I don't just mean the actual retailers themselves, but all the people in the supply chain of those retailers. Indeed, even your own company, you know, it didn't exist, that sort of market niche a few years ago. And the whole sort of web design and all of the sort of e-fulfillment stuff, people didn't even know what it was in '08. But it's all there as huge growing businesses, and actually an area where Britain is very, very good compared to other countries in the world. So there's that. But other sectors have been totally transformed. If you think of the whole tourism, leisure sector, travel sector, completely different, you know, the rise of TripAdvisor, and this whole sort of point that suddenly the consumer has got all that information at their fingertips, which previously people made money by controlling that information.
It's all open and free now.
All open and free. Total change. But then as well, if you think of some of the other sectors that are being changed, manufacturing is being digitized. The whole sort of processes, managing a factory, the whole sort of processes, obviously, of design. If you think of the building industry, that's being digitized. So every single sector is being changed by this digital revolution. And it sounds so simple to say, but it's why I feel very strongly that for the West Midlands to be successful in the future, we have to be digital leaders. And it's 100%. Why it's not the question you asked me, but hopefully people won't mind me pulling it in. And it's why, therefore, this whole question of us winning the 5G competition to be the test bed was so important. And I'll throw this in. We had some lovely stats just about a month ago to say that Birmingham actually is the best connected city in the UK for 5G.
That's a great stat. I love
it. So that is very important to our future. So every single sector's being changed.
And I agree. I'm quite optimistic in terms of right now, what we're having is almost a perfect storm almost. Engagement is so high. So actually, if you can spend now and tell your story, while that engagement is so high, now is the time to build a brand.
That is spot on. I mean, I know this is going to sound hopelessly over-optimistic given the immediate challenges that people face. And I'm sure there'll be questions about how do I get my business grant? What are the arrangements for furlough on the 3rd of December? All those current issues, I accept they are hugely challenging for business leaders. But we also have to think, what are the opportunities 100%. That are going to be there in the future? And there's two ways of taking that question. Where is the opportunity for each individual business? And then as a region, where are our opportunities as well? So if you take something like the automotive industry being critical for this region for nigh on 100 years, and how that's been changed by the whole move towards electrification, the whole sort of move towards cleaner, we've got to think, how are we going to lead in that? And actually, I'm a huge believer, and it's sort of the lesson of '08. You put your bet down now, however difficult the current situation is, because then when the situation recovers, you will get the returns on that investment.
So when we reflect, or when you look back after 10 years, just try and provide a sense of how it feels. What have you learned? What are the key things you've learned over the past 10 years?
The most important thing I learned from guiding John Lewis over, and it was nearly 10 years, I was the boss for, and the whole economic crisis came right at the beginning of that time. And actually the years from 2010 onwards till I left in 2016 were quite benign, actually.
They were easy.
They weren't boom years, but they were steady. And actually JL did okay. And, you know, I hope I'm allowed one moment of indulgence.
Of course you are.
I never achieved, actually, it's an interesting story in other ways. I never achieved this, but there's a vote every year, consumer vote, as to Britain's most trusted brand. And in all the years, my last few years I was there, we were always second. And I was always gnashing my teeth. Why are we not first? Because I don't like being second. Why are we not first? The year after I left, John Lewis was first. And of course, so I didn't achieve that, my successor did. But
it was all your work, Andy.
Oh, no, that's too generous. But the interesting thing is, which organisation was always first and then lost their position? And it was the BBC. Every year we were second to the BBC, which is sort of honourable. And they lost it over their gender pay piece, which does tell you something about what people really, really value. And those sort of morality issues really came through in that. But the point of all of that is we'd had quite a good run. So what did I learn? I suppose the most important thing I learned was about choosing the people who are around you. We only achieved that because I frankly had some brilliant people as my board directors responsible for the individual areas of our operations. And the people I chose tended to be slightly maverick, rather over-opinionated, They had a really good sort of bust up with one another, but that was all positive.
Yes.
So that piece about the team around you was actually far more important than almost anything else,
Wow.
actually.
Okay.
And I sort of knew we would win when I saw the quality of the people we had in those places. And I'll be honest, some of that again involved me being quite tough on some of the decisions about who was and wasn't going to be in those roles. But the single lesson I took from business was about the people who are with you on the journey.
And I guess, as you've said, it's about finding those who do the things that you do not do, because that's what makes a really strong team, isn't it? If everyone's just saying yes, or has exactly the same process, it doesn't work.
Well, that's absolutely right. And I always said you appoint people who know far more than you do. I knew very, very little about online trading, but I knew a man who did. I knew very, very little about, well, I'll give you an obvious example, Christmas adverts. If you asked me to produce an
I was
advert,
about to ask you about this. Yeah.
I wouldn't have a clue how to do it, but I did know that I wanted the best marketing director in the country. And I did know I wanted the most original, as we thought at the time, advertising agency. So there was obviously in that, there's a real sort of lesson. And that was what I learned.
On that point, the advert every year was, it's now an institution, isn't it? We all get excited about it launching. What's your view on what the advert should be, or what kind of conversations will be happening internally now? Because, I mean, how do you call this? We've had a horrendous year, and ordinarily it's the time where everyone goes, it's Christmas, here's our advert. It's really important, and I imagine quite a hard thing to get the tone right this year.
Yes, it would be, and of course they have to judge it well in advance. And this is always tricky. And I mean, you know this from your day job. It's always tricky in any advertising game.
Yes.
You're actually making your decision before you actually know the immediate backdrop when it's going to air. But I do think this would have been clear for all the companies making their Christmas decisions, that the mood of the advert this year has to be about those things we've really valued during the course of the year, which of course are all about family, relationships, friendships, and just those little bits of kindness that have come through. So I suspect it will be about valuing those really simple and sometimes underappreciated things.
Have you heard that, or is that just your guess?
That's my guess. I don't know anything about what goes on in the
Okay.
now. I walked away from it, didn't I?
I know you did, but you've got friends there. I don't know.
Oh no, I have very little to do with it. Nothing to do with it now. It's I mean, it's a different company in a different time now.
Okay. Let's get back to the final thing on my list before we turn to the Q&A, which is just to wrap all of this up. There's a lot of people who run companies watching now. Just distill the advice you've got for all of us on how to operate a business in the post-pandemic world.
So the first thing I should say is to be very modest and say, I don't have necessarily the playbook. I haven't done it. I said that, the 2008 crash was very different to this crash. But I do think there's probably three things that need to be thought about. And the first, and most of the people on the call will know this only too well, the short-term cash is king. You can only make longer-term decisions if you deal with that. And I'm sure everybody is working on that. But that whole point about the businesses that had slightly stronger cash reserves have got more room for maneuverability. The second thing, and I won't repeat it because I hope I made the point earlier really clearly, cherish your team. They're the people who'll see you through the other side. But perhaps the most important thing, and it's very difficult when you're firefighting, is to think, where is my business going to be in the competitive landscape post-pandemic? What are just the small growth moments? I mean, if the economy is will recover, but might still be below 2019 levels for the next 2 years. That's the main prediction at the moment. But there will be some big growth opportunities, whether it be sectors that have done really well or whether it's just parts of sectors. So try to find the way your business can connect into those particular growth sectors, because in any flat market, the winners are the people who get into the right sectoral position.
Okay, fantastic advice. We've got about 10 more minutes with Andy. So if you have any questions, please do put them in the Q&A box. An anonymous question that has been sent in is all about the changing needs of what we will all need in the future. What are your thoughts, Andy, on retraining the workforce for the win-win of low unemployment and high availability of skilled staff to basically aid our recovery?
Gosh, that's a complicated question.
It is a complicated question.
Right. And just so everyone knows, I have not seen these questions, so it's all going to be very spontaneous. So obviously, so
I guess it's how do we upskill and retrain effectively?
I know where I want to go. I want to go. If you think of what we've been talking about for the last half hour, we've talked about the importance of digital. So the single biggest need in our retraining is to improve our digital skills. They're not good enough across the region. They're not good enough across the country. There's lots of evidence that businesses still find it hard to recruit the people with digital skills, and too few people in the workforce, probably still about 30%, some data I was reading last week, have pretty much no digital skills. So this is the biggest area for us. And what we were trying to do pre-pandemic is make sure that the government have something called the National Retraining Scheme. We were a pilot area for taking cash from that and putting it specifically into digital retraining. We've just got a top up of that, and there are schemes open across the West Midlands at the moment, and we're trying to get to, dare I say it, the harder to reach group. We're doing a program particularly for Black women who are particularly underrepresented in tech. So it's really important that we get those new skills for groups who previously perhaps have missed out. So whether it be college, independent providers, some of the universities, all of them working in that digital retraining space.
And where would we go to find out more about those schemes?
If you want to go onto the WMCA website and just put in digital retraining, then that's a great place to go.
Okay. Question from Amy. How do you feel about the impact of coronavirus, and what will that mean for our property market? Will there be areas of our region that'll be impacted more than others?
So interesting. This is just playing out, beginning to play out, isn't it? And the answer is very different for different parts of the property market, both geographically and by types of property. So let's just do the types first. Clearly, light industrial units, well, distribution units, it's just boom time, frankly. So we had, I think, a 3% vacancy rate in that sort of property before the pandemic, i.e. almost nothing, and even more has been taken up and started during the pandemic. So that market seems really strong. Actually, if you come to the next area, residential, that's been one of the surprises, hasn't it? The residential strength. And I just saw a prediction this morning that Birmingham is predicted of all the major cities to have the best house price movement over the next 5 years. So incredible, really, the resilience of that market. But when you think about it, it sort of makes sense, actually. We've all reflected on the places in which we live, and therefore, and of course, the Chancellor stimulated it hugely with the stamp duty exemption. So that also looks very positive, and it's been brilliant to see lots of housing schemes start during the pandemic as well. So that looks good. The really tough one to call, though, is obviously city centre and a commercial property, and of course, retail, particularly within that. I would not like to be an owner of a shopping centre at the moment. We've seen what's happened. Take Hammerson, for example, our biggest investor, and the turmoil in that industry. And it's difficult to see how that's going to solve quickly. And then, of course, the real uncertain one is offices. So I'm actually a believer in the office of the future. It won't be exactly as it's been in the past, but I still think that big companies will choose to have centrally located locations where perhaps people come in not 5 days a week, but the whole idea of being together in a really creative space,
really important,
will come through. So actually, I'd still be a backer of that market. So it's different. And then in terms of areas, you've got it. The city centre is the challenged one at the moment. Suburban locations look really pretty good, and the suburban high street actually looks better than it's
doesn't it?
There's local issues there, so it has affected different places and different sectors differently.
Speaking of which, good question from Jackie about the events industry. We touched upon this earlier with the NEC. She's effectively saying, yes, we're all trying to change how we do various things. The fact that we're we're here on Zoom
Yeah.
having this chat. That's where it is. But she's saying live events will come back. I think that, and I hope so as well. But the industry needs urgent support from the government now.
And
Would
Jackie,
you
you are
agree?
right on both counts.
Right.
So just on the it will come back, it's been fascinating how we've all adapted. But Ed and I were joking before we started, actually.
I miss people.
It is. It's the virtual thing is no substitute
No.
from a live piece of theatre, a live music gig, a live sporting event, and it's just so clear to me that we are social beings and we will come back. And that, by the way, is why I'm still a believer in the city centre, because whatever the social activity is, it will be focused on the city centres once again in the future. So I totally agree with your prediction. And actually, I also agree with what you said about there needs to be specific support from government, and it needs to start with the big venues. It's why I called out the NEC. The fact that they have been closed and there's been no sector support is not right. And
awful.
so I do need to up my lobbying on this. As you probably, many of you will know, we were successful in lobbying over the support for hospitality for tier 2. We've got to get on and try to win support for the live events sector as well. The one thing I would just say is the government have been actually, I think, very good in the Cultural Recovery Fund. I think we've got some more than our fair share, some would say, actually, certainly in the cities of Birmingham and Coventry from the recent Cultural Recovery Fund. And so that was at least a clear response to the institutions. But I'm acutely aware that actually the suppliers, the freelancers who support all of the live events industry, they've not had that support. So there are definitely still things we need to lobby on.
Good question from Rob. What would your key piece of advice be to young people who were finding it tough anyway, and then obviously when coronavirus hit, it would be easy to lose hope? What would your advice be for those people in that situation?
Yeah, it's perhaps the most difficult and important question of all, actually, because it's when all the theory becomes very real with people's lives, isn't it? This, and it might sound odd, but I sort of get it, because I was 18 in 1981, the last time there was mass unemployment. And frankly, this city then was a pretty uninspiring place. And same would be the case for Coventry, Wolverhampton, other parts of the West Midlands, not just Birmingham, but I was brought up in Birmingham, so I say that. And you saw amongst that generation how it could become a hopeless situation. And so we've got to do all that we possibly can to prevent that happening again, because it's corrosive in every way. And there's very clear evidence. If you lose opportunities when you're 18, there's still the consequences of that are likely still to be with you when you're 50. So really important question. So what we're trying to do is make sure that even if the job market is dreadful, there's still some opportunities in place. And it's why obviously the Kickstart scheme, the government scheme there, has come into being this week. And as many businesses across the West Midlands as I can possibly encourage need to step forward to take someone on without all costs are paid for by the government, but it gives someone a start. And of course, it's why we're doing all we can to make sure retraining and training programs are available there. And then if you turn to the question directly, what would I say to a young person? It would be, even if you can't do what you hoped to do because the economy isn't supporting those job opportunities, it would be take one of those opportunities, because it will at least keep you involved, it will stimulate, and it will provide the bridge to possibly something better in due course. And it's very important to keep in that sort of that swim, really.
It absolutely is, yeah.
And it's so important. And we've all got a responsibility to try to make sure that there are those opportunities there for people, even if they're not quite what we hoped they would have been.
Along the same lines, actually, and this might be a nice place to leave it. I really like this question from Shami. What are your top tips for supporting your own mental health? We're about to go into another 4-week lockdown. And I guess the point you made earlier, it's tough. No matter who you are, no matter where you work, it's tough and it's hard for a lot of different reasons. So could you just talk a bit about your routine and what tips you would pass on to all of us about how to stay mentally strong?
Yeah, well, it's interesting to ask that question today, because I've just had 2 weeks of self-isolation, actually.
How did you find that?
You got the message, and I'm conscious it's only 2 weeks, and I'm conscious I'm lucky I live in a nice flat in the middle of the city. Some people are living far more difficult situations over the next few weeks. But even that was a little test to me. And I'll admit, on the first day of it, I thought, how am I going to cope with this? So actually, I've had a sort of small bit of experience of it. And I suppose I would say two things. Actually, just let me make a general point first of all. There is advice available on this through the Thrive mental health program. Actually, again, if you go on the WMCA website and just put in Thrive, which is our branding for our mental health work, and this whole Thrive at home, we called it. So actually, to take tips about managing your mental health at home, we prepared it at the beginning of the last lockdown, so it's there now. So please go on and look at that resource, and it might just prompt a few ideas. My own answer to it is actually, and this is going to sound so straightforward, physical exercise. And even if you're in your own home, you can do it. But I honestly think that some physical discipline helps you. My norm is to go and run along the canal, or when the pools have been open, to go swimming. But I can't do that, obviously, when you're in 2 weeks lockdown. So I thought at the beginning, right, how am I just going to make sure that I've got some sort of physical discipline so I don't vegetate? And I did. I made sure every day I just had a little routine. And I honestly think for a lot of people that does make a difference. And then I guess also the whole point is just the telephone, the internet, whatever.
Reach out to people,
There's
isn't
a
it?
lot
Speak to
of
people.
friendship out there. That's why I said what I did about the advert, obviously linking the questions together. And there's been incredible networks. And I know there's some people who are very lonely through all of this, but there are brilliant networks through Age UK, for example. So just remember to give those people who perhaps aren't going to get many calls, many Zoom calls and all of that, which we all know, we're probably the lucky ones with all of that. But remember, those networks are there, and invest in them yourselves.
Perfect. All right. Final question, and this is an observation from Rob, and I think I know the answer. But we've already talked about having an optimistic view of the future, even though we've got to get through some shit first. Rob is effectively saying, are we on track still in the West Midlands with Coventry 21 and the Com Games? Are we still on track to absolutely be to showcase the amazing things we have right here to the whole world? That's still our aim, and that is still what we will achieve, right?
One word answer, yes.
Brilliant.
But you don't want just one word, obviously.
No, I want a bit more than that.
So yeah, that's always never an interviewer's dream, is it? Because you've got to think of the next
yes,
question.
Thank you. I'll ask another one then.
Yeah, exactly. No, okay. The answer is yes. But let me just explain why I say that so categorically. In 2017, when we won these two competitions, the Coventry City of Culture and Commonwealth Games, it was great news then. It is even more important news now, because my goodness, people are going to need events, celebrations, as we've said earlier on in this webinar. But actually, it also brings in investment and jobs. And we're already training people up for host roles for City of Culture, and also we're just starting on thinking about the volunteering structure for Commonwealth Games. There will be so many opportunities, and of course, remember, Commonwealth Games is £1 billion of investment in the transport, the venues, and everything that goes around it. So it is a superb opportunity to showcase what goes on here. So really, really important. And it's a sort of link to the question, Ed. What we've also tried to do is make sure some of the really big infrastructure projects, obviously HS2 is the big daddy of them all, but some of them that we can control as well, that we've not flinched in those. So those, in terms of job creation, are really important for the region as well. So, we've got 3 ace cards that other regions haven't got: City of Culture, Commonwealth Games, HS2. And I think if you were looking from other parts of the country, you'd say at least the West Midlands has got some real anchors for its recovery. So I am enormously relieved that we worked incredibly hard to win those rights, and we've got to make the most of them.
I can't wait. I just think it'll be amazing. And I just think it's another chance for the world to see the just amazing stuff we have right here in our region.
I'll drink to that if we're allowed to early in the morning.
We will be at some point.
Indeed.
And that's a great place to end this. Andy, appreciate your time. It's been just awesome to get some real honest answers, and it's all been pre-recorded too. So, if anybody missed any of this or you want to share it, it's all available to rewatch and share. Andy, as ever, thank you and have a fantastic day.
And thank you, Ed. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.